everybody. Thank you for welcoming me to your headphones. I am Fernando, and I am from the Rollback Podcast. The movie I'm going to be reviewing is the 2018 movie written and produced by the stars Daveed Diggs and Rafael Casal, Blindspotting. Let's get to it. Colin, played by Daveed Diggs, a parolee facing his final 3 days of probation, needs to stay clear of trouble. Miles, played by Rafael Casal, Colin's hot-tempered best friend, can't stay out of it. When Colin witnesses a police shooting, the two men's friendship is tested, sending Colin and Miles on a collision course with each other in this bold and thought-provoking film that bursts with energy, style, and humor. Thank you. I know I got through this with one take, but we must move on with the show. Cut. So this movie was written and produced by Rafael Casal and Daveed Diggs. They are actually best friends in real life, and unbeknownst to most, they are actually rappers in their other jobs. I have known about them since 2013 due to a friend of mine because he showed me their rap, and I fell in love with it. It is absolutely something that catches my fancy. I love their music, and so when I found out that they're writing a film, I was very intrigued, and I was very distraught when I found out that this movie wasn't going to be opening in my hometown. It was going to be opening at least 4 hours away, so I had to wait for the Blu-ray. And once the Blu-ray came, I was the first one to buy it, and I absolutely loved the movie. The movie was this original piece of work written by these two original guys, and it's a completely original work because it's taught that gentrification is something that's very real to real people. It deals with the gentrification process in Oakland. It deals with police brutality, it deals with police shootings, and it deals with the repercussions on the police as well as the people involved. So the movie begins with Colin and Miles heading home from a local burger joint that they realize has changed due to the gentrification process. And then as Colin is heading home, he gets stopped at a red light. While he's waiting for the red light, a man just comes and hits his car, and he's distraught, befuddled, and he's like, "Hey man." And the guy takes off running away, and following behind him is an Oakland police officer yelling, "Stop, stop." And the man yells, "Please don't shoot," and he is shot by the police officer. At that moment, I believe this is some of the best acting that I've seen, because you see Colin and you see the officer make eye contact with each other, and you see this very real connection of scared, of terror, of horror on both ends. You could tell that the cop isn't a monster, but he is terrified. And you see Colin terrified because he's a parolee and he just saw someone get murdered in front of him. So you can tell that these two have this connection in their eyes through their stares with each other. Colin heads home distraught, completely befuddled by the whole situation. As he leaves, he remembers the car alarm beeping when the police officer shot his gun. And it just beeps, and it ends up merging into his alarm clock. So you could tell it's still with him. And the next day continues. You see Colin meet up with Miles because they both work for the same moving company. And you find out that Miles has his own family with another black woman, and he has a biracial child. And so you could tell that Miles and Colin, Miles being white, Rafael Casal, and Daveed Diggs being black, that they have this unique relationship where it's never been about race, it's never been about skin color, because Rafael Casal grew up in Oakland. He is as much Oakland as Daveed Diggs. So there's no racial tension there. But you can tell that Rafael Casal still gets looked at a little bit different. He gets looked at as if he's one of the people that is gentrifying Oakland. So he has to deal with this new label that people are placing on him. And you could tell that it's something that's weighing on him, and you could tell he's doing everything in his power to not be labeled as that, because he is from Oakland. He is Oakland. and you could tell that he's hurt by this. But throughout the film, you see Rafael Casal and you see Daveed Diggs with this very unique relationship that just plays so well on film because of their real life relationship, because they're friends in real life. And you see them make their way throughout their lives. They run at a moving company, and you see them interact with people. You could tell that Rafael Casal's character is kind of a smooth talker. There's some instances in the movie where he's laying his silver tongue down and he is getting people to do what he wants because he just has that personality about him. He's a talker. You could tell he just likes talking to people. And you could tell he could get people to do what he wants. But you can also tell that he also has a temper. You can also tell that he's a very angry guy, possibly because of the gentrification and because people judge him. So you could tell that he is a very complex character. Colin is he's very in his own head. He's trying to change himself because of what he did in the past, what he went to prison for, and he's trying to better himself. But he also knows that Miles is his best friend. He knows that this man has been there for him throughout everything, and he can't just let that go. It would be a shame to their relationship. It'd be a shame to their friendship. So you can tell that they are conflicted in that way, where Daveed Diggs is trying to grow after his instance in prison, and you could tell that Miles is more trying to stay the same, and if not, getting worse. Like I said before, gentrification is a big theme in this film. Because they're movers, you see a lot of the gentrification. You see them going through houses, moving things out, and you see realtors fixing houses that local people used to live in, but now you can tell they're gonna fix them up and upcharge people incoming to Oakland because it's a growing community, and it's gonna end up being what San Francisco is. That's a sister city to Oakland. It's this very high-end city, and now Oakland was always considered this rough city, and now they have to deal with them being gentrified as well. The theme of Blindspotting comes from this scene where Colin and his ex-girlfriend are going over these political terms, and one of them it's the term Rubens vase, where it's a vase and two pictures in the same picture simultaneous, but people will see one or the other first. And so the theme of Blindspotting comes from Colin not being just one thing, he's multiple things. So he wants people to stop seeing him for just one thing, but to see him as a whole, and to read the whole picture and not judge him based solely on one aspect of himself. You can tell that because Colin feels that no one sees the whole picture, that he is very conflicted on the inside, and it's stemming from this incident that he had that sent him to prison. Colin and Miles were bouncers at a club, and this gentleman shows up, and he's very braggadocious. He gets this very fancy drink that has a flame in it, and he goes outside and he starts showing off to his friends. And Colin tells him, like, hey, if you're gonna have that drink, you have to go inside. You can't be having it outside. And the guy starts getting a little agitated and says, I'll go inside. And he doesn't. And Colin ends up telling him, like, hey, man, like, I have to take the drink from you. He's like, no, man, I'm going inside. And eventually it gets to the point where the guy shoves Colin, and the two are very different. The man is white. He's not very threatening looking, and you can tell that Colin is not he's a threat if you push him, and he also has Miles there, and he also has another friend there. So you can tell that if anything happens, Colin's going to be in the upper hand. He's going to be able to hurt this man. And he ends up fighting him, and Miles jumps in as well. And they both start beating on the man, and the drink ends up spilling on him, and his leg ends up catching on fire. He doesn't die, but he is severely hurt. And you can tell that you could tell that Colin is forever fixated on this point in his life because it's such a bad moment, and it's such a defining moment because it's what sends him to prison. His girlfriend was there, and she saw everything, and you could tell that she looks at him at a different light, and he doesn't want that. He wants people to look at him how they used to, and it's very hard for him to come to grips that this is happening. And you could tell that Colin is throughout the movie, he is trying to change people's interpretation of him. Miles is more so the camp where he wants people to look at him as an Oakland grown person and not as a white person that's just coming to live there. So with this endeavor leading up, you can see that Colin is on a one-way ticket to a very bad place if he continues living the life that he used to live. He's very much trying to change, and he's trying to convince people that he's trying to change. And this movie ends up leading into a situation where Miles' son finds Miles' gun while they're having dinner, and Miles, Colin, and Miles' wife are looking at the son, and they're trying to keep a calm situation calm, and they're trying not to get anyone excited, leading to Miles getting the gun from the son, and luckily nothing happening. But then Miles' wife finds out that he had bought a gun, and she didn't know about it. And so Miles expects for Colin to take the fall, but Colin doesn't. He makes it very clear that it's not his gun. And so they end up leaving the apartment because the wife is distraught. She tells them to get out. So they're outside the apartment and they're arguing. And you can tell that they're just trying to blow off steam, but they're still very high-tempered. And at this point, they realize that there's a friend's party that they wanted to go to because they just want to get out of the house. They just want to cool down. And so they head over to this party, and it's in Oakland as well. And it's very evident right off the bat that this house was an old house, but it was bought by this tech manager who changed the house completely different from what it used to be. And you could see the houses around it. The houses are old. It's very classic Oakland. And then you see this modern home right there in front. And you could tell where they're going with this, where this guy is a part of the gentrification problem. And so they go to the party, and it leads with Miles and Colin just kind of bashing on it because they're so weird. They're just trying to impress people. And so they're just kind of bashing it playfully. And at one point, Miles goes to get a drink, and one of the guys at the party kind of rubs him the wrong way and tells him, "Hey man, you don't have to act like that," thinking that he's acting tough because he's gentrifying himself to be in Oakland. And so when Miles hears this, his inner self just snaps because he has been fighting this whole time to not be considered an outsider. And this person just called him an outsider in his own hometown. So you could tell that Miles is fuming. And at that point, you see the person coming back to get something from the kitchen, and you can glance at Miles, and you see Colin look at Miles, and you could tell something's going to go bad because Colin is just thinking like, oh, fuck. And then next thing you know, you see Miles punch the person that made him feel like an outsider, and they get into a violent altercation stemming from the kitchen. And then Colin grabs Miles, takes him outside, and they're about to leave, and the guy ends up chasing after him, and they end up fighting in the driveway, and it just gets bloody and bloody and bloody. At one point, the person is on top of Miles, and Miles is calling out for Colin to help him, and Colin just freezes because he doesn't want to do this. He doesn't want to be in this situation. And then next thing you know, Miles finally gets a reversal, and he starts beating on the guy, hits him into a car. And then you see the person who owns the house come out, and he's like, "Hey man, you gotta go." You can't be doing this here. You gotta go. Kind of just like any normal person would do. And you can tell that Miles is just even more agitated. And he says, no, you have to go. This is where I'm from. And he pulls out the gun that he had bought and he starts shooting in the air to scare them away. And this leads to probably one of the most powerful scenes in the film, where Colin and Miles are behind this warehouse and they start going at it, not physically, but through their words. They start hashing it out. They start hashing out how they both have different mentalities, how Colin has to worry about certain things because he's black and Miles doesn't because he's white, and Miles always has to up things up because he has to feel like he has to make people believe who he is, while Colin doesn't have to do this because of his skin color. And you could tell that Miles never really thought about this. You could tell that he kind of just glanced over it. And you could tell that Colin has been holding this in, and he's crying. He has tears in his eyes. And he's telling him, you're the person the police are looking for, not me. I am good. You're the one that ups the ante. You're the one that brings me into trouble. And so their interaction for that night leaves at that. Colin leaves back home to his halfway house, and Miles leaves back to his apartment, and he has a broken hand. He meets up with his wife, and his wife is there bandaging his hand, and she has a heart-to-heart with him, tells him, you're not listening to me. Like, you need to listen to me. You can't be doing this. Like, we have a son. Like, what if things would have gone wrong? He had a gun in his hand. And you could tell that Miles was very distraught by this, because while he was angry, he knew that he was in the wrong, but he just didn't know how to process that anger. So the night ends. They wake up the next day. Colin goes pick up Miles for their job, and they end up going to this moving job, and they catch the wife and the son leaving. The wife mentions that the husband is downstairs. And so they're moving stuff, and you can tell that Colin finds something very, very disheartening, and he looks at a picture, and he ends up going downstairs where the husband is. And while he heads downstairs, Miles comes into the house, and he's looking for Colin, and he sees the picture himself also. And he sees the picture, and it's the police officer that shot that man in front of Colin. And as Colin makes his way downstairs, he sees the officer standing there, and the officer turns around and sees him, and they see his service pistol on the table, and the officer goes for it, and Colin actually has the gun that Miles had yesterday. After the fight, Colin had picked up the gun, and he points at the officer. And it's this very defining moment where, is Colin gonna finally step the line and not be able to turn back? And you could tell that Colin is very distraught at this point. Miles comes in and he tries to calm the situation. And so Colin kinda addresses the situation the only way he knows how, through his words. So he begins to say a poem off the top of his head. It could be construed as a poem or a rap. I look at it as a poem, and he basically is saying, you have to see both pictures to the officer. You have to see that he's not a criminal, and he's more than just a black man. He's something else. He starts going after how the officer shot the person went that fateful night. Colin begins to rap, and some of the lines in the rap are very good. They're very heart-wrenching, because you could tell this is how he feels. At one point he says, you monsters got me feeling like a monster in my hometown. And while he has the gun pointed at the officer, he says, does this scare you, huh? Fuck you know about being scared. Were you afraid when someone was gonna come find you, huh? And then Miles tries to calm him down, and he says, what, man? I'm just talking to him. You said make it pretty, right? It's like the bounce of it, the words. They like the bounce of it. Like a tree on a sign, man. We cut right down. And you could tell that he has been thinking about these words, that it's not just off the top of his head, it's words that have been lingering in his head for the entire time. And he asked the officer, how old was he? How old was the man that you killed? And the officer says 26. And Colin says, 26? That's how many years you decided it didn't mean shit? All this talking don't mean shit? I mean shit. I've been in an eloquent spitting hella developing. I've been telling Shellin and not to walk like a felon and fucking flipping the middle finger to feeling irrelevant. Reveling in my freedom till you turn heaven to hell and hello, sir, are you listening to me? You have to open your eyes and fucking listen to me. Because at one point the officer gets scared and he's afraid that he's gonna be shot. And you could tell that Colin is just really getting raw with his emotions in this one. And he ends up going through this rap and he starts saying, I don't remember never feeling it. The one that going dummy never felt the need to run, but I've never been sprinting until I limp across the finish line with a gun up in my blind spot. Really ain't no hard to figure out that you probably never really felt the pressure of a man, but you know what? I never felt the pressure of a trigger. The difference between me and you is I ain't no killer. I ain't no killer. And at this point, the officer is just completely distraught. He's crying. And as Colin puts the gun into Miles's chest, he gives it to him and he walks away. The officer just lets out, I didn't mean to. And Miles looks at him and he says, are you sure? And it leaves it at that. And I thought that was a great way of showing that this cop isn't the monster that the movie kind of made him out to be. But he's also this character that did something terrible. But he feels immensely bad for it. It's not something he's proud of. It's something that he wishes he could take back, but he was scared. And I thought that was a very good way of them showing the two sides to a horrible situation. Now with this movie, I felt like this movie really needed to be seen. Unfortunately, it was a very small opening, very limited release, but from the people I've told to watch it, from word of mouth, everyone I've heard from has given me great results because they love it. For me, this movie was just great. And not just that, I mean, I think they really went well on all aspects. David Diggs and Rafael Casal actually came out with their own versions of the soundtrack from each character's perspective. David Diggs came out with a soundtrack with Colin's perspective in mind, and then Rafael Casal came out with the soundtrack with Miles' perspective in mind. And along with those two soundtracks, and then the movie's music throughout, it's all intertwined in this very unique way, but that works so well. For these two guys who never written a movie before, for them to be able to mix all this together really well, it's kind of astounding. And I can't wait to see what they do next. I hope that they make another movie. I hope that they continue to make music, but I mean, if I had to grade this movie out of 5 stars, I'd give it 5. I'd really give it 5 for their ingenuity, for their take on this very unique situation and making it very open to the rest of the world, to the rest of the country, to these audiences that have probably no idea how Oakland is, and they don't know about the gentrification in this city. Well, this is the end, folks. I want to thank you for welcoming me into the Rollback family. I want to thank you for welcoming me into your headphones. If you want to follow us, you can head to the rollback.net. You can find us on Spotify. You can find us on Apple. I am Fernando, and this is The Rollback.